5 minutes while he called out for help, while community said, please stop. And the notion that you or I would have been put in jail upon doing something like that, he was not. It's just wrong. It needs to be addressed.
It's extremely rare for a mayor to call on the prosecution of one of his own police officers. What about this case compelled you to take this position? And did you have any hesitation with that?
In City Hall, there is precedent and protocol that is literally baked into the walls, that is baked into the mortar, that says that you shouldn't act quickly, that you shouldn't speak out, that you should hold off and wait a second. But here's the thing, at a certain point, we need to speak on behalf of our communities. We need to speak on behalf of black residents who have seen this happen over and over.
And you need to speak when ambition calls. And don't be fooled by this clown, people, because if he really cared, this stuff wouldn't have happened. If he really was worth his salt, and he's the mayor, let me say this, and I know this is going to sound hyperbolic, almost braggadocious, but if I were mayor of Minneapolis, I would have addressed my policemen, and they would most assuredly have known that this kind of crap wasn't going to happen. And for this little political weasel, Fry, I don't really know what he's about, but I've heard enough of him. You know how you know he's a weasel? Because his ambitious little self is trying to capitalize on a national story that dropped in his lap. And instead of being part of the solution, he's fanning the flames to be part of the problem. The black people have a right to be pissed off. And they may burn Minneapolis to the ground. And if it happens, this mayor kind of deserves it. And then he can tell us about his community. But I'll tell you what a good mayor wouldn't do. He wouldn't bring up separate entities of said community. And he wouldn't say that this should offend us because this was a black man. This should offend you because you are an American, not because of any other demographic label. And the nonsense that this only happens to black people is the greatest insult of all. This happened to me. This happened to me. But for the fact that I had 4 friends who were state police who came to court and testified about my character against 5 sheriffs who did that to me, right? There would have been probably no justice. I didn't get a whole lot. But I'll tell you something that did happen. When I confronted the cop that did most of it after they handcuffed me, and I did nothing other than defend myself in an altercation. As a matter of fact, I will tell you, a rather large, tough guy came at me over an incident that had nothing to do with me. Well, he found out what a quick lesson of jiu-jitsu will do because I knocked him out with basically one punch. And this isn't to talk like a tough guy, but it did happen. And all 6'3" of him and 200 and some odd pounds hit the ground and he was asleep before he knew it hit him. And I was just standing there afterwards because basically none of his friends knew what to do when one of them apparently went at me with a chair. I never saw it. One of my friends did, and he was a wrestler and lateral dropped the guy with the chair right to his back. And as the cops came running up, that's what they saw. And they tried to arrest my friend, and I stood up like a man and said that guy had nothing to do with anything. I had a fight with one of those guys. And the cop said, "It was you?" I said, "Yes, sir." He asked me to put my hands behind my back. I did. They handcuffed me, and 5 or 6 of them proceeded to try to kill me. And the only words I said to them was, "Yes, sir." So I know what this is like. So every time I see another incident, Rodney King, Freddie Garner in Harlem. Every time I see this, I'm pissed off. Is it more egregious because they're black guys? I suppose. It certainly don't look good when a smart-ass, smug white cop is pushing his knee into a black man's neck, driving his face into the pavement. But I'll tell you, if it happened to you, it's a whole nother level of understanding. So maybe my failure is I can't do the black thing. Because no human being should suffer this. I don't care if that guy committed murder. You're a cop. Your job is to seize and apprehend, not to be judge and jury, not to do punishment. You're not to do it. I will also tell you, if that black gentleman was one of my family or close friends, that cop wouldn't be worrying so much about getting fired. Because I think I'd have visited him. Like I told the cop in court, who looked at me in utter guilt and shame and said, hey, it is what it is. I said, I tell you what, pal, remember that the day you retire. And you're going to find out what is. Lucky for that scumbag, he died of cancer not long after, maybe 10 years after this event. But I most assuredly would have ended him. And this is what we need. Posse camaratis justice. When some dirtball thinks he's above the law, he needs to be strung up. Whether it's this punk cop in Minneapolis, or Mr. Potato Head Brennan in the CIA, or Mr. Comey, or that weasel Strzok. This is what happens, and every American, by the way, is to blame for this, and I'm going to tell you why. I've been saying this for over 20 years. This is the byproduct of the new Praetorian reality. And all you Americans who tolerate this hero talk. He's a hero. Sean Hannity, Bubbles, every night. 99% of the FBI are good guys. It's only the 1%. It's only the... Bullshit. Don't you tell me that. Don't you tell me because you're black, white, you're a policeman, you're a soldier, that you're some good guy. Don't tell me because you wear a collar backwards and you're a priest, you're a good guy. I don't know you. You don't get near my kid. Eh? But America, Greyhound America, leave the driving to us. In the book of Isaiah, it says, nobody shall attain the kingdom of heaven lest they come on through me. That's a contract between you and the Messiah. No priest, no minister, no charlatan monk can pray you into heaven. He can't even pray you onto a bus. And this idea that you could leave your children in a public school and they'll be safe. You can leave your children at the Little League field at the Boy Scouts. Let me tell you, it's all the same affliction. But this hero-worshipping nonsense has to stop. If you get a paycheck, shut up. If you don't want said paycheck, quit your goddarn job. But don't expect me to venerate you. Now, there are cops that are heroes. There are house painters that are heroes. But that notwithstanding doesn't make them particularly any different than you or me. And this has to stop. And I'll tell you how it stops when we stop this hero BS. These cops are so entitled they're out of control. All of them? No. But it ain't 1%. What particularly will stick with you if you've ever been in the situation I was in is how insane they all become. Now, if you do something provocative, you instigate a problem with cops, yeah, you may have it coming, but that's not what happened to me. And I will tell you, I couldn't have been more passive. And I don't think they could have been a whole lot more aggressive, short of killing me. So, this particular lad on the sheriff's patrol had a list as long as his leg for doing stuff like this. Now, this was back in 1981. The judge even referred to this guy's record, called him a liar in front of the whole courtroom. So I'm going to tell you this happens. And as bad as the guy was that was the instigator, the other 4 or 5 guys that were all chiming in were no better. The Wolfpack syndrome. Ain't a lot of men that are going to step up and say, hey man, that ain't right. Did you see those other cops? When they had that poor black man's head in the pavement with the knee in his neck? Where were the other cops? That's what they do. And then they do a mea culpa. And then the sergeant shows up and covers it up. And then the lieutenant shows up and covers it up for him. And then the captain covers it up for him. And on it goes. And this has been going on forever in human history. And all you have to do is watch the Nuremberg trials. Same syndrome. I was only taking orders. Mea culpa, mea culpa. That's what every mayor ought to be called, Mayor Culpa. And this guy, to start fanning the flames of racism, why, this shouldn't offend me as a white man? This pisses me off to no end. I'll bet you I'm a hell of a lot more angry than 90-some-odd% of the brothers in this country. Because unless you've had this happen to you, you can't know. So, I'm sick of politician weasels like this rat bastard trying to capitalize fame and glory for himself by stepping into the breach the day late and the dollar short. Maybe that should be a prerequisite. Maybe you should have had to been abused by some jackass cop before you can have a political office. Maybe that's one of the prerequisites. Because this is 2020 and there's no GD reason this is still going on. But I'll tell you something. And this is where the black people have every right to be exceptionally mad. But it should offend all of us. How many of these cops just get off scot-free? What we saw in this example was flat-out murder. That's what this was. They murdered that man. And that offends me as a white man. It offends me as an American and as a human being. And I don't need to affiliate with some demographic to know wrong when I see it. And that's it. And so any weasel politician that tries to bifurcate the obvious for political gain is part of the problem. He is now an accomplice. How many more people are going to die over this incident? And this guy fanning the flames for his ambition, and that's what this is. Don't be fooled by his sophomoric political BS. He's looking to get elevated. He sees the governor's mansion in his eyesight. That's what this weasel sees. And that's part of the problem in general. It's all about them. If they did their job, this wouldn't happen in the first place. So every one of the people in Minneapolis that are protesting and demonstrating, demand this guy resign, because it happened on his watch. End of discussion. Then go after your governor. There's no excuse for this, but for their apathy. And then they only react. You heard him say it himself. More times than not, it shapes me. We don't get to shape events. Bullcrap! That's the admission of a failed politician and not a leader. A leader leads. A leader sets an agenda. Know the truth and be set free. These people are the problem.